This is the three holiest sites in the Islamic world. This is Saudi Arabia, Mecca, Medina, and this is the Dome of the Rock, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is where Muhammad was supposed to ascend to heaven. And the Jews and the Christian Zionists believe that this must be destroyed so that they can build the third temple, or Solomon's temple. Okay? All right, so this is the big question in this war. And again, I keep on saying this, but I need to be right in my prediction if my analysis is to be correct. If they do not destroy the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and if they are able to achieve peace, then my predictive model, my analysis is completely wrong, and you just ignore me, okay, for the rest of my life. And I can go back to teaching, great books or something.
What about China's ability to impact outcomes in the Straits of Hormuz with what is now the government of Iran, and then 50% of their oil on the other side waiting to get through?
Well, China and Russia are sitting on the sidelines monitoring everything. They're in close touch with the government. They're providing satellite intelligence, which accounts for some of the tremendous successes, particularly in Israel and our U.S. bases. All of our bases have been destroyed. Our harbor installations are destroyed. We're actually having to fall back on India and Indian ports, which are less than ideal. That's what the Navy says. And I think Iran, much to our disappointment, is faring very, very well. The question is, how long can we keep this up? I think logistics is the vulnerable part of this entire operation. Remember, you've got to go back and reload. You've got to fly things in. You've got to sail in. Iran is a continental power, 93 million people, the size of Western Europe. Both China and Russia are continental powers. They don't have supply chain problems. Their manufacturing capabilities are intact. Right now, the missile cities that underlie all of Iran's provinces are untouched, and they have an inexhaustible supply of missiles.
Israeli politician, leader, Naftali Bennett, explaining Israel's next step. Here's where they're going next. Watch.
A new Turkish threat is emerging. I want to be very clear. Turkey and Qatar have gained influence in Syria, are seeking influence elsewhere and everywhere throughout the region. And from here, I warn, Turkey is the new Iran. Erdogan is sophisticated, dangerous, and he seeks to encircle Israel.
It's hardly an endorsement of Erdogan, the Turkish leader, hardly an endorsement of him to say when Bennett says he's dangerous, what he really means is he's sovereign. We can't tell him what to do. We don't fully control him. We can influence him, and it's clear that Israel and Turkey did have some kind of relationship in the overthrow of Bashar al-Assad in Syria last year. Just a guess. But the real problem with Turkey is that it can't be controlled, so it is therefore a threat to Israel. And again, not attacking Israel. That is true, in the same sense that when we have hostile leaders in big countries in our hemisphere, it really bothers us. And sometimes we kill them, regime change them, and we make up this whole, no, it's really important. The people of country X need to be free, but really we need to be unconstrained because we're a great power. That's what it is.
You're not some guy on Twitter. You're a senior, as of yesterday, you were a senior U.S. Intelligence official who's not hostile to President Trump, who's not here to write a tell-all book or launch a media career. So I think you're a sober voice on this. And just to be clear, there was no intelligence that showed an imminent threat. There was no intelligence that showed they were on the cusp of building a nuclear weapon. There was no intelligence, indeed, that showed they were trying to build a nuclear weapon. And nobody said, I've seen it, but you haven't. It exists, but you just haven't seen it. Did you ever hear anybody say there is intel that shows this?
I did not know, but I know how this works. I know the Israeli officials, some in intelligence, some in government, will come to U.S. government officials, and they will say all kinds of things that we know from our intelligence just simply isn't true. And they'll say, hey, I'm giving you a preview. It's not in intelligence channels yet, but here's what's going to happen. And that doesn't usually come to
We knew not that Iran was going to attack. He did not say that.
Right.
He said we knew that Israel was going to attack Iran, and in retaliation for those attacks by Israel against Iran, Iran might attack American forces. So the imminent threat that the Secretary of State is describing is not from Iran, it's from Israel.
Exactly. And I think this speaks to the broader issue who is in charge of our policy in the Middle East, who is in charge of when we decide to go to war or not. In this case, with what the secretary described, and later on the president, later on the Speaker of the House, and the way the events played out, the Israelis drove the decision to take this action, which we knew would set off a series of events, meaning the Iranians would retaliate, that are killed off, like we just killed, Ali Laranjani, who was a negotiator, who was eager to get us a deal. Again, look, I've got no love for the IRGC. I've got no love for the Iranians. But you've got to realize,
just to be clear,
if you want it to end,
in case you're tuning in right now, you fought their proxies.
I fought their proxies. I mean, I put countless of them in flex cuffs or much worse. I've gone after the Iranians. I was in specialized outfits that went after the Iranians and their proxies. These are very serious people. They're not supermen by any means. They're humans, but they're serious. And if you give the IRGC a reason to take more control, and they get support from the people, because again, you kill off the Ayatollah, they can say, "Hey, the last guy was too moderate. Look at what it got us. Like, give us more control."
I get it.
And the Iranian people are going to be like, "Well, actually, yeah, I don't like getting bombed by the Americans and the Israelis. Maybe we do need to listen to the IRGC."
So a lot of these, the points that you're making, I think, are insightful, but they're also pretty obvious if you kind of game it out for 10 seconds. Yeah. So it seems like you've got two different goals. You've described Israel's goal as just regime change, permanent chaos, take Iran off the map as a coherent nation state, just tie them up with internal chaos. Whatever the effects of that are on the rest of the world, all of them disastrous. Then on the American side, you have the president's stated goal, which is we can't let Iran have a nuclear weapon, which they didn't have and weren't trying to build in any imminent way.
Right.
Okay. So if you join those two together in a common mission in a war, like that's our partner in this war,
yeah,
then you create all kinds of very bad incentives. Mm-hmm. And now Laranjani, I think, was killed by the Israelis. You saw the Israelis blow up Qatari natural gas facilities today in the Qatari natural gas field, which feeds the rest of the world, LNG. Those seem like very obvious steps, not to minimize the threat from Iran, but to lock.
And then, Charlie Kirk is killed publicly in a very horrific way, and we're not really even allowed to look into that at all. And Charlie Kirk was one of President Trump's closest advisors, and he also advocated heavily against a war with Iran. He was in the Oval Office in the lead up to the 12-day war. I wasn't particularly close with Charlie. He was very gracious to me when I was running for Congress, very, very supportive. So we knew each other. And the last time I saw Charlie Kirk on this earth was in June in the West Wing, in the stairway. And I said hi to him, and he looked me in the eye, and he said very loudly, and it's a small, you've been in the West Wing, it's small, it's a tight space. And he said, "Joe, stop us from getting into a war with Iran," very loudly.
He was single-minded.
And he walked off, and he went, I believe, into the Oval. So when one of President Trump's closest advisors, who is vocally advocating for us to not go to war with Iran and for us to rethink at least our relationship with the Israelis, and then he's suddenly publicly assassinated, and we're not allowed to ask any questions about that, it's a data point. It's a data point that we need to look into.
So imminent threat, you're saying that there was no intelligence that you saw with the highest level clearance, obviously involved in this conversation, that showed an imminent threat from Iran to the United States?
No, unless we took certain actions, unless we came after them in a way that they thought threatened the regime.
Former National Counterterrorism Center Director Joe Kent gave his first interview since his resignation from the Trump administration on the Tucker Carlson show. The resignation is the highest profile rebuke yet of the Iran war from a Trump administration insider. Kent's claim defies what President Donald Trump said in his speech announcing the U.S. strikes on Iran.
Our objective is to defend the American people by eliminating imminent threats from the Iranian regime.
Kent is a controversial figure who has faced criticism for promoting conspiracy theories and his past associations with far-right figures, including white nationalists and a Nazi sympathizer.
But there was no intelligence that said, hey, on whatever day it was, March 1st, the Iranians are going to launch this big sneak attack. They're going to do some kind of a 9/11 Pearl Harbor, et cetera. They're going to attack one of our bases. There was none of that intelligence.
Was Iran on the verge of getting a nuclear weapon?
No, they weren't, 3 weeks ago when this started, and they weren't in June either. I mean, the Iranians have had a religious ruling, a fatwa, against actually developing a nuclear weapon since 2004. That's been in place since 2004. That's available in the public sphere. But then also we had no intelligence to indicate that fatwa was being disobeyed or it was on the cusp of being lifted. The Iranian strategy, it's actually pretty pragmatic. The Iranians are obviously aware of what's taking place in their region, and their strategy was to not completely abandon their nuclear program because they saw what happened to Muammar Gaddafi in Libya when he said, hey, I've got no more nukes. I'll do what you say. I'll give up my nukes. And then conversely, the Iranians also knew that if they came out and said, okay, we've got a nuke, whether they were bluffing or not, Saddam Hussein, Iraq right next door. So the Iranians' position when viewed from the lens of the region was actually fairly pragmatic. They were preventing, themselves from developing a bomb, but they still wanted the ability. They wanted the ability to enrich. They wanted the ability to have some components so that they weren't completely stripped of it.
Under the law, you are responsible for providing national intelligence to the president, correct?
Yes.
And to the heads of executive branch departments and agencies, yes?
Yes.
And to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs and senior military commanders?
Across the IC, yes.
And to the Senate and the House and relevant committees, correct?
Yes.
And the law states that the national intelligence you provide to Congress, quote, should be timely, objective, and independent of political considerations, correct?
Yes.
And you noted in your opening statement you're here fulfilling a statutory responsibility and that your testimony, quote, represents the IC's assessment of threats,
That's right.
Correct? That opening statement, as submitted to the committee in advance of this hearing, stated that as a result of last summer's airstrikes, quote, Iran's nuclear enrichment program was obliterated, end quote, correct?
That's right.
And is that in fact the assessment of the intelligence community?
Yes.
So the assessment of the intelligence community is that Iran's nuclear enrichment program was obliterated by last summer's airstrikes.
Yes.
In the opening statement you submitted to the committee last night also stated, quote, there has been no effort since then to try to rebuild their enrichment capability, end quote, correct?
That's right.
And that's the assessment of the intelligence community.
Yes.
The White House stated on March 1st of this year that this war was launched and was, quote, a military campaign to eliminate the imminent nuclear threat posed by the Iranian regime, end quote. That's a statement from the White House. Quote, the imminent nuclear threat posed by the Iranian regime. Was it the assessment of the intelligence community that there was an imminent nuclear threat posed by the Iranian regime?
The intelligence community assessed that Iran maintained the intention to rebuild and to continue to grow their nuclear enrichment capability.
Was it the assessment of the intelligence community that there was a, quote, imminent nuclear threat posed by the Iranian regime, yes or no?
Senator, the only person who can determine what is and is not an imminent threat is the president.
False. This is the worldwide threats hearing where you present to Congress national intelligence, timely, objective, and independent of political considerations. You've stated today that the intelligence community's assessment is that Iran's nuclear enrichment program was obliterated and that, quote, there had been no efforts since then to try to rebuild their enrichment capability. Was it the intelligence community's assessment that nevertheless, despite this obliteration, there was a, quote, imminent nuclear threat posed by the Iranian regime? Yes or no?
It is not the intelligence community's responsibility to determine what is and is not an imminent threat.
Okay.
That is up.
It is your job and the job of your agency and department to assess the views of Iranian leadership, their policy beliefs and policy positions, correct?
Yes.
That includes now deceased Ali Khamenei of Iran, correct?
Yes.
And the now leader, his son Mujtaba Khamenei, correct?
Yes.
The son is considered more of a hardliner than his father. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
So hardline that even some of Iran's leaders thought he was too aggressive. Isn't that correct?
That is the intelligence community assessment, yes.
Mujtaba, the son, is particularly close to the brutal Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and their most hardline commanders, correct?
That is the intelligence community assessment.
He was involved in ordering violent crackdowns on Iranian protesters, including their murder, correct?
Yes.
And we don't know if the son will continue his father's religious ban on developing nuclear weapons. Is that correct?
It is unknown at this time.
You testified before this committee last year that the elder, now deceased Khamenei, had in 2003 banned the nuclear weapons program, or suspended it, correct?
There was a fatwa in place that stated that.
And that fatwa remained in place last year when you testified before this committee, correct?
Yes.
And that fatwa remained in place recently, correct?
As far as I know, it has not been lifted.
Yeah, you're aware of no information that would lift that fatwa.
I'm not aware of any intelligence reporting that states that. To be clear on the Mojtaba, the son who has been named to replace him, it is unclear of his status or his involvement. He was injured very severely through one of the Israeli strikes. And so the decision-making is unclear about what's happening in the Iranian leadership.
So it's unclear. So we're less certain of the positions of Iranian leadership and their intentions than we were 60 days ago, correct?
That's an accurate assessment.
Was it the assessment of the intelligence community that there was an imminent nuclear threat posed by the Iranian regime?
The intelligence community assessed that Iran maintained the intention to rebuild and to continue to grow their nuclear enrichment capability.
Was it the assessment of the intelligence community that there was a, quote, imminent nuclear threat posed by the Iranian regime, yes or no?
Senator, the only person who can determine what is and is not an imminent threat is the president.
False. This is the worldwide threats hearing where you present to Congress national intelligence, timely, objective, and independent of political considerations. You've stated today that the intelligence community's assessment is that Iran's nuclear enrichment program was obliterated and that, quote, there had been no efforts since then to try to rebuild their enrichment capability. Was it the intelligence community's assessment that nevertheless, despite this obliteration, there was a, quote, imminent nuclear threat posed by the Iranian regime? Yes or no?
It is not the intelligence community's responsibility to determine what is and is not an imminent threat.
Okay.
That is up to
Here's
the president
the problem.
based on a volume
no,
of information
it is precisely
that he receives.
It is precisely your responsibility to determine what constitutes a threat to the United States. This is the worldwide threats hearing.
Let me tell you a story. In 1906, the Americans invaded the Philippines to civilize them. The Spanish had been the colonizers in the Philippines, but they were kicked out, and the Americans now come in to take over the Philippines, to civilize them. And there was a volcano crater where some Muslim Filipinos went to hide from the American forces who were killing people. They killed over 200,000 people. In this crater, these villagers hid. An American army found them, and they massacred 300 men, women, and children, including babies. And you know what they said? We had to kill the children because they were using them as human shields.
Yeah.
There's nothing new under the sun. It's just that they don't tell you this stuff in school.
Because if they tell you it's going to be a pattern, and then you're going to recognize it.
My belief is when this regime falls and new people come along, that we're going to have an historic opportunity to do things in the Mideast no one has dreamed of in 1,000 years. That if the regime collapses, then I think the likelihood of Saudi Arabia, the center of Islam, the keeper of the holy mosque in Mecca and Medina, I've been there many times, is willing to recognize Israel, the Jewish state, which would be the effective end of the Arab-Israeli conflict. What does it matter to you? How much money have we spent and how many people have lost their lives because we get sucked into this conflict?
He has no one with him, actually, who does remotely understand the Iranian mindset. And when you think about sort of his war group, I mean, he's got Pete Hegseth, the Fox News host. You know, he's got the very excellent General Kane, who's, you know, a logistics man, and a very good one too, but he's logistics, as he says, you know, don't ask me, I don't do policy. He doesn't. You know, he's got a guy who builds shopping malls in New Jersey, which is, you know, Steve Witkoff. You know, I mean, these are his son-in-law, Jared Kushner. Tell me amongst that group who really understands anything about the Iranian mindset. Well, they don't.
You know what? You put a very interesting finger on this issue because, you know, even if you didn't want to criticize those people, you just have to look at the end result. And so far, it's 180 degrees different to what they expected. And you mentioned Steve Witkoff. I am still stuck in the shock of what he told Fox News a few days before the war began, which is President Trump is frustrated that the amount of military assets we've sent to the Gulf have not caused the Iranians to capitulate. He literally used those two words, frustrated about non-capitulation. Anybody could have told him, anybody. Just look back a few years. Look back to the Iran-Iraq war. This theocratic, ideological regime in Iran does not capitulate, and they would rather go down fighting than capitulating. So there and then, as you're meant to be negotiating to avoid this war, they don't get it. And I was absolutely stunned also by what you're saying. He doesn't have the right people around him because, as you know, they went in and eviscerated the State Department, the National Security Council, all these, the think tanks, all these intellectuals who may or may not know a little bit more about the Middle East for decades are gone.
It means we're fighting to win. It means we set the terms. We'll know when they're not capable of fighting. There'll be a point where they'll have no choice but to do that. Whether they know it or not, they will be combat ineffective. They will surrender.
Typically, the understanding of a surrender is person to person. Is that what would be required in a matter like this?
Well, there's a lot of different ways. Whether they want to admit it or not, whether their pride lets them say it out loud or not, it's President Trump who will set the terms of that.
In Afghanistan, name the Islamist enemy, whether they are Sunni or Shia, because this is a Shia regime, Sunni or Shia, and Iran's been willing to harbor them as long as that group is willing to try to kill Americans. So the enemy of their enemy has been their friend as well in the Islamist world. So Iran, whether it's Iraq, whether it's Afghanistan, whether it's around the world, has been targeting Americans. And what they wanted in this context, and what President Trump would not tolerate, is a regime of that nature being closer and closer to nuclear capability. The world, the Middle East, our ungrateful allies in Europe, even segments of our own press should be saying one thing to President Trump. Thank you. Thank you for the courage to stop this terror state from holding the world hostage with missiles while building or attempting to build a nuclear bomb.
The American people also want to know what they're sending their men and women to war for. Is there a concern of this spiraling into a longer war? And then one for the chairman when you're done.
Did you not hear my remarks? I mean, we're ensuring the mission gets accomplished, but we are very clear-eyed, as the president has been, unlike other presidents, about the foolish policies of the past that recklessly pulled us in to things that were not tethered to actual clear objectives. So we know. We have plans, we have generals, we have chairmen, we have commanders, CENTCOM commanders, Admiral Cooper.
They weren't supposed to go after all these other countries in the Middle East. Nobody expected that. We were shocked.
Are you surprised that nobody briefed you ahead of time that might be their retaliation?
Nobody, no. The greatest experts, nobody thought they were going to hit.
In testimony today, President Donald Trump's top intelligence officials seemed to contradict his claim that nobody expected Iran to go after U.S. allies in the region.
The president says nobody knew, and my question is, did you tell him?
What I can tell you is that Iran had specific plans to hit U.S. interests in energy sites across the region, and that's why the Department of War and the Department of State took measures for force protection and personnel protection in advance of Operation Epic Fury. I think that's what's most important.
CNN reported that the Trump administration underestimated Iran's willingness to close the Strait of Hormuz. Senators asked top intelligence officials if the president was briefed on that likely outcome.
Did you brief the president if he starts a war of choice, that the likely result would be that Iran would strike adjacent Gulf nations and close the Strait of Hormuz? Did you brief him on those two facts that I think have been consistently the assumptions of the intelligence community?
I have not and won't divulge internal conversations. I will say that those of us within the intelligence community continue to provide the president with all of the best objective intelligence available to inform his decisions.
Yesterday, Secretary Rubio told us why now. In a stunning statement, we knew that there was going to be an Israeli action. We knew that that would precipitate an attack against American forces, and we knew that if we didn't preemptively go after them before they launched these attacks, we would suffer higher casualties. Have we now delegated the most solemn decision that can be made in our society, the decision to go to war, to another country? That's the implication, the breathtaking implication of Secretary Rubio's statement, which to me is the only explanation I've seen as to why this action was taken when it was. There were no objective facts on the ground that said this is something we have to do now. There were no missiles being loaded on launchers. There was not a nuclear bomb being rolled out. I'd like some response on policy. Is now the policy of the United States that we're going to be taken into a war by the prime minister of another country?
Iran's conventional.
I find it very disturbing that we're committing this nation to war based upon a decision by even though a staunch ally, and I'm a supporter of Israel, but I don't think anybody should drive our decision to go to war. But
هناك تكتم إعلامي دكتور حول حجم الدمار والخسائر داخل إسرائيل. برأيك لماذا تلجأ إسرائيل إلى هذا النوع من التكتم خلال هذه الحرب؟
الجانب الإسرائيلي تعلم درس كبير من حرب 12 يوم، لم يعد يبث لا عن المواقع التي تصاب بشكل كبير ولا عن نسب الخسائر، حتى لا يتم عمل فيدباك أو مراجعة عكسية من قبل الجانب الإيراني لعمليات الاستهداف وتقييم الضربات ونسبة الضربات. الاحتلال الإسرائيلي تضرر كثيرا، هناك خسائر كانت في أهم نقطة وأهم هدف تم استهدافه خلال الأيام القليلة الماضية، وهو ستوت ميخا، هذا المركز الذي يعتبر مخ ودماغ الاستخبارات الإسرائيلية، لأنه في مركز C4I أي بمعنى مركز الكمبيوتر كوميونيكيشن كنترول كوبريشن فور انتليجنس، ما يعني أن الخلل في الاتصالات تم إصابته. وهذا المركز بالمناسبة في كان في مناطق جنوب تل أبيب في شتوت ميخا. الأمر الآخر استهداف منظومات داخل العصب البنية التنظيمية الإسرائيلية فيها مشكلة، أي بمعنى استهداف قليلوت التي تضم الوحدة 8200 أيضا كان هدفا ذا قيمة، ولكن التراجع بالاستهدافات والتراجع بانتقاء الأهداف والتراجع بالدقة من قبل الجانب الإيراني هذا أمر ملفت. بالمقابل هناك استنزاف، حتى نكون موضوعين بالطرح، هناك استنزاف أمريكي إسرائيلي في منظومات الدفاع الجوي، وتحدثنا في الحلقة الماضية أن أهم نقطة هي إدارة المخزون، والمخزون أو الاستنزاف بلغ نسب عالية في منظومات الدفاع الجوي، ولكن البديل لدى الجانب الأمريكي الإسرائيلي موجود، طريقة التزويد متوفرة، اللوجستيك متوفر أكثر من الجانب الإيراني المحاصر والذي لا يملك طرق للتزويد ولا لإدارة المخزون. على سبيل المثال الجانب الأمريكي استخدم طائرات ميروبس يوم أمس، آلاف الطائرات. نعم. الميروبس وهي طائرات مسيرة صغيرة كلفتها بسيطة، هذه الطائرات أوكرانية يمكن لها أن تقوم باعتراض الطائرات المسيرة الإيرانية، مما يخفف الكلفة على عملية الصواريخ الاعتراضية.
If this war continues for weeks or months, then Israel could just be destroyed, or very large parts of it. Now, I think Israel is a harder target than the Gulf states. Their infrastructure is more hardened. Also, they're further away. The Gulf states are vulnerable to drones and short-range missiles, whereas Israel is mainly vulnerable to long-range missiles. Nonetheless, at some point, their air defenses could become exhausted if it hasn't happened already, and Israel could get seriously destroyed. And then you have to worry about Israel escalating the war by contemplating using a nuclear weapon, which would truly be catastrophic. So there's a lot of scenarios here, a lot of really frightening scenarios about where escalation could lead.
I've been a loyal supporter of the president for almost 20 years. This goes back to when I was 21 years old and I was Miss California at the Miss USA pageant. And I've known him, I consider him a dear friend. And I will tell you right now, I do not recognize our president. I think that we are an occupied nation. I think that a foreign country has occupied our government. And we are seeing now that this president of the United States of America is being influenced by a foreign government. And MAGA, let me tell you right now, MAGA is dead. It is deader than dead, and Americans are furious. We do not recognize President Donald J. Trump anymore.
احنا اللي فنينا عمرنا علشانكم. في 56 الجيش حارب انجلترا وفرنسا واسرائيل. ما شاء الله ما شاء الله. امال انت كنت فين؟ بايت بره؟
عارف يا بوتين يا اخويا، انا عامل احترام للمصريين، انا ايضا انهم شعب طيب. بس السؤال هنا، هل اللي بيحصل ده هيأثر على سعر البتيفور ولا لا؟ ادخل كده شوف لي المصريين خلصوا كحك العيد ولا لسه، علشان انا عايز اعلن الحرب. لسه قدامنا كام يوم، لو تخليها بعد العيد يبقى تمام قوي. انا ضعيف قدام المصريين، ما اقدرش ارفض لهم طلب.